Congratulations on a great weekend once again. We did see a little bit of a dip, not just obviously here, but across the globe with the pandemic. And even though the show continued on, it wasn't at full blast. I think it's safe to say it was cooking yesterday. I mean, you couldn't even get through that expo. It was busy, it was bustling. The sponsors are back, the events are back, the strongman, the arm wrestling, everything else that you have involved here with the weekend. So it had to feel pretty good from your standpoint to be able to, I saw you kind of get through the crowd, go to see some of the sponsors and booths. It was busy.
Well, it is great to see, almost 500 companies displaying their goods here, and to be out there and see all these big, different manufacturers, food supplements, and weight equipment, and clothing, and all that stuff. So it was really so packed and so active. And to have then all those different sports in the middle, kind of mixed in, if it is weightlifting or powerlifting, or it is the world's strongest firefighters competition, or the world's strongest man competition, or whatever it is, or the amateur bodybuilding competition. It was just all really fantastic. There was great energy from the beginning to the end. So I think that we truly can say that we are back again, and I hope this virus doesn't come back in one form or the other. Because what had happened this last 3 years was devastating, I think, for the whole world, not just for our industry, or not just for fitness, but for everything. I think everyone had to suffer. A lot of people lost their lives because of it, and government didn't really handle it well, as you could see, right? And so I think it was terrible. We were shut down the first year. It was like 3 years ago. Literally, everyone, all of the companies came in and put their booths up there, and they had their order, the convention halls were filled, and then all of a sudden we were told by the authorities that we cannot have the event. I mean, imagine the amount of billions of dollars that we lose, because they already spent their money on sponsorships and paid for their space, and then all of a sudden they would go home and they couldn't do business. So, so we lost a lot of money, but luckily we are not into making money, so we always reserve the profits that we had in the past, and we used that money and made up for it. And now we're back again, and it is really great. It's, I think that people were really happy with the show, with yesterday's show, and also the Friday, and with all the different sports. I mean, it's amazing when you think about 60 different sports from 80 different countries. And we have 15,000 athletes here. There's no other place. They have a lot of different fitness conventions and things that are similar, including FIBO in Europe. But there's nothing that comes even close to our events, and to our energy that we have, and the amount of people that come through here, the amount of different sports that we have. No one has that. They try to copy it, but which is always a nice compliment. But no one can do that. I think we have a really great team. It's not because of me, it's because we have a great team. And Columbus has been a really great city to host this event here.
Well, speaking of a great team, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the very touching and fitting tribute that you did to your partner and friend Jim Mortimer last night right here on this stage. Standing ovation by the crowd. You can't say enough about Jim Mortimer. I mean, you guys just go way back. I was telling him a story just before you came. About how that kind of took place back in 1970 when you were a competitor, competing and winning the Mr. World competition. And as a side note to that, a lot of people don't know this, but you just competed just 48 hours ahead of that in Europe.
24 hours.
24 hours.
For 24 hours. On Saturday night, I won the Mr. Universe contest in London, and on Sunday night, was the Mr. World competition here in Columbus. And so we try to figure out, how do we do that? Because there was no night flight out of London to New York or Chicago or something like that, so we had to wait until the next morning. And so we waited until the next morning. The first flight was out, was like at 10 o'clock. So we arrived in New York, let's say at 12, 1 o'clock with the time changed. But how do we now get the flight that comes here before 4 o'clock when the free charging starts in the afternoon? So we told Jim Norma, I said, look, it just doesn't work. We cannot make it. And he says, well, I will make it happen. I said, how? He says, well, maybe we'll get a private jet. Now you have to understand, the day to get a private jet is very easy if you have the money. But in those days, no one had a private jet. But Jim Lorimer found a private jet. And he found the private jet was owned by Volkswagen. They were one of their corporate offices here. And so he got the jet from Volkswagen and he leased it from them. They picked us up in New York when we arrived in New York and flew us to Columbus. And they picked us up, and I remember with the sirens and the whole thing, we went from the airport to come into the town. We came backstage from at the Veterans Memorial Auditorium, and there I saw Sergio Oliva and all the guys already pumping up. So we quickly, Franco and Dave Draper and those guys, we all ripped off our clothes quickly, slapped on a little bit of oil, and started pumping up, and then all of a sudden they called us out. This is how tight the schedule was. I mean, think about it. So that's when, after, I won the competition, I went to Jim Lorimer and I said, Jim, I said, you and I have to become partners. I said, this is like unheard of, to be so well organized, to have us be able to get picked up in the private jet, come to Columbus, and then to compete here, and then the treatment that we got here, how well it was organized, and everything was just a straight 10. I said, we got to go and run competitions together. And he says, well, let me know when. I said, when I retire. And so at that time, I did not know when I'm going to retire. So in 1975, I remember I called him before I went to South Africa to the Mr. Olympia competition. I said, can you prepare a package that I can present to the International Federation of Bodybuilding, to the Congress in South Africa, and go and make a bid for the Mr. Olympia. Because there will be others that wanted too. I remember Japan wanted it, Germany wanted it, there were other places in the Middle East that wanted it. So I said, I have to have a really great package. And he sent it to me. And then there it was in Johannesburg. I went to Pretoria where the Congress was, and I won the bid. Because of Jim Lorimer's package, because he had a letter from the mayor of Columbus, he had a letter of the governor of the state of Ohio, and he had the fire marshal and this and that, and they had letters from the hotel that we have the rooms available, and we have the auditorium available, the Veterans Memorial Auditorium. All of this evidence was in that package, and no one else had that kind of proof. So of course it was easy for me to win the bid. And I got the bid, and then from 1976 we started promoting the Mr. Olympia and Mr. Universe competition right here in Columbus, Ohio. That's where our relationship started. But I just wanted to add, the weirdest thing is because at that time I did not know Jim Lorimer. I just knew that he was business executive, he was vice president of Nationwide Insurance, and that he ran the world championships in weightlifting and in bodybuilding. But I didn't know anything else. So when I then came into town, he says, do you mind if we go quickly over to the city hall in Worthington? I said, what are we doing there? He says, well, I'm a judge, and there's some cases there that I have to handle. I said, you're a judge? What the hell? So we go over there, and now I'm sitting there in the courtroom, and he's the judge. And there's all these cases, traffic violations and other kind of violations. And he's the judge. I know it that he's a judge. Then the next time he explains to me, he says, well, automatically when you're the mayor of a town, you're also the judge. So I said, well, I didn't know you're the mayor. The mayor of what? And he said, Worthington. I said, they never told me that. So then the next time I come into town, and he says, can you come over to the university? He says, to talk to my students. I said, what do you mean, my students? Well, what is that all about? He says, well, I'm a law professor at the university in Columbus. So I said, you're a law professor? He says, yeah, I write law books about insurance law. And I said, oh, Jesus, what else do you do? And then I find out he was an FBI agent for years. He worked undercover for many years, directly on the J. Edgar Hoover. So you find out all of those things as you go on. I mean, he was just a really fascinating guy, very smart. And then one day he calls me. He was up in Canada, at this Shakespearean festival. I said, you into Shakespeare? And he says, oh yeah, everything about Shakespeare. This is all his plays and all the movies that has to do with Shakespeare. I'm a Shakespeare fanatic. So that's another discovery. So it's just one after the next thing. So he was just a really, really smart and talented guy, and became a really close friend.
So, 1975, you decide to retire.